Hello everybody and welcome to the Royal Astronomical Society. We're here today for the Meanwhile Back on Earth event in conversation with Oliver Jeffers in partnership with the Royal Astronomical Society, CLPE and HarperCollins Children's Books. My name's Dr. Sheila Kanani. I'm the Education Outreach and Diversity Officer at the RAS. I'm also a planetary science and author and a teacher. I absolutely love Meanwhile Back on Earth, and also here we are. Here we are particularly because of the messages of kindness, but the space references as well. And being a teacher, particularly of GCSE astronomy, I'm really excited to be here today because this event is for teachers. So without further ado, we will start the questions. So you've just been around the UK promoting your new sculpture, Our Place in Space. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to place?
It's basically the coming together of about 5 or 6 different things. I've always been interested in how we know what we know as people. And I remember reading Bill Bryson's book, A Brief History of Almost Everything. And, just like how heavy is the earth and who worked that out. And, it's like my reading that I do, I tend to read nonfiction because there's so many interesting things that have actually happened. It almost seems like a waste of precious time to read about things that are completely made up, even though I completely make things up half the time. But in that, he says that there's, the maps that we have of solar systems in classrooms are wildly inaccurate because you can't really have a scale map of the solar system just given the amount of space and everything. And I thought, that's so fascinating. Could you do it as a sculpture? And I thought about this for a long time. I talked to various people along the way. It's like, well, where could this be done? How could it be done? And something really clicked whenever my brother and a few other people from Northern Ireland had heard about this open submission for commissions from Unboxed, which is part of the Unboxed Festival, and just giving real money to real art projects that weren't, just the extension of something else. So a lot of times money in public art is as an extension of a development, but this is the first time I'd ever seen real proper money that was actually for art. And so as a group from Northern Ireland, we were thinking, well, what can we talk about? And at the back of my mind, I've been playing about with this idea of, could you do a scale model of the solar system? And Professor Stephen Smart was in that group, and we were talking about that. And then the idea of how to link it to Northern Ireland, suddenly the penny dropped. I was like, yeah, you know what? I've been explaining Northern Irish politics to people in New York for a long time. And it really kind of dumbfounded me a little bit just how little they knew or cared. And that sense of perspective from a problem totally changed how I thought about it. And could we apply that to this scale model of the solar system? So we came up with an idea of it not being a scientific model, but being an art project about how you feel about the way in which we divide ourselves when viewed from a distance. So it's a 591 million to 1 scale. So the Earth is the Sun is 2.5 meters in diameter, and Earth is about that size. It's about 500 meters away. Yeah. And, all sorts of really fascinating things came out of that, like, trying to find relatable comparisons. Yeah. So how long does it take light to get to the Earth from the Sun?
8 minutes.
8 minutes. You can walk on the trail from the Sun to Earth in 4 minutes, which means that you're traveling at twice the speed of light.
Yeah, I like stuff like that.
Things like that. But I went to Tennessee to see a total eclipse of the sun once. The path of totality, and it's a big difference from that seeing it when it's 100% eclipsed to even 99%. Yeah, because you don't see the moon until it's like 100% eclipsed, and suddenly there's this big black hole in the sky. And as somebody if you can walk, you can navigate a room, you're spatially aware, and you understand distance that you feel. And all of a sudden, when I was looking at the black hole in the sky, I was like, wait a minute, I'm looking at 2 objects with a massive amount of distance between them, and I suddenly felt it. I was like, how do I communicate that? Yeah. But then, if Earth is this size and Mars is like a third of that size, and it's 100 and something meters, you wouldn't be able to see it, especially unless you're in a total vacuum. But I came up with another idea then, having spent some time in Vegas with 10,000 librarians, actually, for the American Librarian Association. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's how you get somebody's attention, is with neon letters and arrows. So built these arches with the name of the planet and a big giant arrow, so you could kind of work out where it is, and you get that feeling. And so that's how it came to be. And
brilliant.
Yeah, it's the idea being that it's how you feel about Earth, and it all relates back to Earth.
Yeah.
And looking at ourselves and how we, as I say, how we divide from a distance.
Definitely. We do some scale models, when we go into schools and things, and we use fruit and veg and toilet rolls, but you can't, it's hard to do scale and size all in one go.
It really is.
That covers both things.
So you need 8.5 kilometers, 8.9 kilometers to get to Pluto. And you need it in a relatively straight line, just for the feeling to work, because even though how often the planet's actually neatly in a straight line.
Yeah.
And it's if we were being closer to reality, it might be that you start at the sun, then you walk to Earth, but Mars might be on the other side of the sun. And maybe not even on the same plane. It's like it's everything's sort of being dragged around behind the sun like a DNA or something.
Yeah. So what's your favourite sculpture or planet in that trail?
Well, I think that my favourite sculpture in that trail is actually the big Us Them Earth that we call it, and we still haven't managed to get it quite right because it's so complicated. But it's every border is sort of raised up as like a wall almost, and inside every country there's two sets of lights. A red light that says them and a blue light that says us. And the idea being that they alternate, and you can look at any conflict at any point in history from either perspective by that simple metric. And it's like, and then it changes, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, whose side am I on? What is is there an us and a them? That I think that one really, really works. But it works best at sort of sunrise or dusk because of the lights, or maybe in winter, or the sun, because it was just a lot of fun to make it look like a sun, like one of my drawings.
Yeah, brilliant, cool. So the exhibition launched in Derry and then Cambridge. It's a really good place to take children, and it's free for the public.
Yeah,
and it's going to Liverpool next.
Yeah, it's I don't know when this is airing, but it's opens in Liverpool on the 15th of October for probably 4 or 5 weeks, I think. And then it'll end up back in Northern Ireland. So
teachers can take their children, their school children to, brilliant. Yeah. And then Meanwhile Back on Earth was inspired by the trail.
It was. It completely was, because, working with tech designers and engineers and astrophysicists, I think one of my biggest roles in it was, aside from like the inception of it, but was like reminding people, like, this is not a scientific model, although it is. That's not the end point of it. This is an art project, and the art project, any art project is you want to try and communicate a way. You want to help people feel a certain way. So how do we get people to feel a certain way about this? And when you start at the sun and you get to Earth, you're thinking about Earth, but once you leave Earth and you're heading out further out into the solar system, my thinking kept being like, how do we get people to look back at Earth?
Yeah.
And also in just finding these like relative ways to talk about that just the pure distance that we're traveling and the speed. Actually, I had this idea when I was with my son on our way to my father-in-law. His grandfather used to be a race car driver. Okay. So we were on our way to see the track that he used to race on, and Harlan was saying, he was like, I'm going to drive at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I was like, no, you're probably not. But I was thinking, like, do you feel like we're going fast now? And he said, yeah. And I was like, this is 40 miles an hour. And then I suddenly thought, wait a minute, kids would know what 40 miles an hour feels like. Adults know what 40 miles an hour feels like. What time would it take to get between the planets in reality at that speed? Yeah. And so Professor Stephen Smart and I got him to come around to the studio, and we sat and worked it out. And he was able to do all the calculations in his head, which is just beyond me. But it very conveniently, at 40 miles an hour, it would take you 11,000 years to drive to Pluto, which is sort of the birth of civilization. Yeah. So I was like, what do you do with that information? And I was like, this is a way that we can use the time it takes to drive between the planets as a measuring stick to look back in time. Yeah. And because the whole thing was about us, them, and these ideas of division and how we fight each other over space and these imaginary lines in the sand, using that, you could throw a dart back through history, and wherever it lands, you're going to find some all-consuming battle over territories or
Is that
border
just some
disputes.
Sad coincidence sort of thing?
No, it's a sad consistency. It's not a coincidence. It's like we have just always fought each other over space until about 11,000 years ago, when we were too busy trying to just survive the elements to bother with fighting each other.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we are now, need to be.
Yeah.
And it's so that, whenever I was starting the book, the war in Ukraine was just breaking out. And it was like, do we include this or not? And it was almost like too late to, but we thought about it. And then I thought, no, I'm not going to, because this is actually the first time, the historians call, since World War II, the long peace. Because it's actually the most peaceful period of human history. It just feels like it's a lot more turbulent and angry because we have access to information immediately from everywhere. And I don't think humans are designed to compute that much information coming at us from every angle. So it feels very turbulent and very broken, but it's just because we're more aware of everything. So it's the most peaceful period of human history. And I wanted to sort of make that point. It was like, really, for the first time in 11,000 years, we need to work together to survive the elements rather than just distracting ourselves with fighting each other.
Wars between humans, So the correlation between the world conflict and the planets and looking back in time, did the distances come first, or did you pick the conflicts? Or
no, it had to be accurate. Yep. So basically, it was like, all right, 11,000 years. That's a pretty nice. You could go whatever speed, if we'd gone a bit faster, but just because that's the speed I happened to be driving at that point with my son, it was like, wow, this really works. It's actually 37 miles an hour. But I think Stephen found out that it was slightly more like fitting if we just reduced it, and that it's kind of the average speed that people drive at. So it's like a very understandable metric. But then at that point, it was, you can like pick a date 400 years ago, what battles were going on. There were so many. It was the difficult thing was actually choosing which ones to do. That would be that. And here was the way that I decided to include them or not was, are they visually identifiable without either naming the place or the people or the conflict itself? And so you'll notice that, like the American War of Independence, for example, it just says some people, after crossing an ocean and fighting the people who were already there, decided to start fighting each other. That's all you really need to say about that. It's like, imagine explaining any of these conflicts to an alien. It's like how ridiculous they sound. And that's sort of the way I felt whenever I was explaining. For example, I'm a patron of integrated education in Northern Ireland. And when I got the letter through my studio in Brooklyn, my intern was a young African-American woman from Atlanta. And she was like, integrated education? What does that mean? And I was like, it means two groups of white Christians go to school with each other, even though they believe in slightly different versions of the same religion. I was like, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And when I started pointing that out to people back at home, like, I suppose when you put it like that. And it's like, so a big part of it is almost trying to explain the ridiculousness of these conflicts with enough perspective to somebody who really doesn't know anything about them.
And teaching the next generation that we've got to work together. So with time travel in mind, if you could time travel, where would you go and why? Or when would you go and why?
I think I'd go about 50 years into the future.
Okay. Just to see how similar it was?
Yes, because almost to just sort of test my own theories. Because I'm an optimist, but I think that things are actually getting radically better. Okay, even though everybody else thinks that it's all going to hell in a handbasket. I think things are getting radically better. And I have a feeling about why. And I'd be just very interested to see.
Okay. Is that anything to do with children?
No, I mean everything's to do with children. It's like children are future adults. But what I think is that we are over the last 10 to 15 years, we've been really at the sort of the dregs of the barrel of the breakdown of community in society, which sort of happened systematically at the end of World War II. Whenever I suppose the USA became very influential, very wealthy, very quickly, and no ill intent. I think advertisers all over the world figured out that you make a better customer if you're in competition with your neighbor. So keeping up with the Joneses, and it was just that slow eradication of a sense of community, and it was all about you as an individual. And like look at today. the job of trying to be a mother with a job is almost impossible. Yet everybody sort of feels like that it's expected.
Yeah.
And, that like it takes a village to raise a child is true.
Yeah.
And it's this, I think we're starting to recognize that's why we feel so unsettled. And we're starting to reforge the bonds of community.
Yeah, which is so important.
Yeah.
So important.
And why things feel so turbulent and wrong is because we're actually talking about them for the first time.
Yeah.
If you think about any of the big issues that we're facing at the minute, and then picture them 50 years ago, they were way worse back then, but we just weren't even talking about them.
Definitely.
So the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference, and we're no longer indifferent.
Which is good. Good, yeah. So the book is a story about a father and his children journeying through space. Yeah. But as you read it, you begin to realise that Earth is very much at the focal point of the book. Was that always the point?
It was exactly the point, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was what Galileo figured out, that Earth is not the centre of the universe.
Yeah.
But it actually is.
For us, it is, yeah.
Well, because, for what other life is there? What other consciousness is there? This is the only place where stories exist or anything makes sense.
Definitely.
And I got Stephen Smart as Zinger with this one, because I asked him, I was like, what's the one point in all the constellations that's the same? And he goes, there isn't one. I was like, yeah, there is. Earth. So those patterns don't make sense from anywhere else in the universe.
Exactly, yeah. We are the centre of our universe. Yep, definitely. Although, so that's a whole nother question.
No, it depends on how you define centers. Like, is it movement or is it meaning?
No, exactly.
Because if it's meaning, this is the center. But if it's movement, then
definitely not.
So who knows where the center of the universe is?
Yeah, and again, from the center of the universe is from our point of view. So even in geography.
Exactly.
So how would you suggest that primary teachers can use this book?
I think this book, you can use it to talk about space and time, and just how much space there is in space. I think it's a good way to show like the rough geography of our near galaxy, and the movement of planets. But I think it's also its most useful point is looking back through human history, and just the conflicts of territories. I stuck pretty exclusively with issues or battles that were about land or space or territory. I stayed away from religious ideologies, things like that, because that gets into a lot more. That's like mental territory, and it's cleaner this way.
Yeah, you can get to pick one type of battle.
Yeah,
definitely.
and looking at kids fighting in the backseat of a car, you're like, that's is this what Putin's doing right now? I mean, it's and then the lines like my daughter actually said, "Don't look out my window." It's like this is a pretty funny comparison for the way in which people interact with each other.
Kids are right. So did you always have a fascination with space when you were a child?
I did, yeah. I think I got to go to summer camp when I was in upstate New York when I was a kid, and when I was about 11. And the Belfast is known for light pollution. I mean, British Army put in a lot of streetlights so they could see things at night. So you don't really see a lot of stars there. But in upstate New York, very rural. And I remember at night, they were doing a music on the grass, and we're looking up at the stars, and you could just see everything. And the Milky Way was there, and somebody pointed out that the galaxies are flat like a dinner plate, like a frisbee. And when you see the Milky Way, we're at the outside of the plate, looking into the middle. And I was just like, suddenly I got a sense of this massive overview. And ever since then, I've been pretty fascinated with.
Brilliant. That's what I like to hear. What about the artistry and the illustrations? Did that come from teachers kind of recognizing your talent, or was that?
Oh, in general?
Yeah.
No, I think it was more because I figured out that I could use it to get out of doing other things.
Excellent.
My mum and dad were always very encouraging in art. They never really, there's my book, Once Upon an Alphabet. I think the dedication is to my dad. It's to my dad, and is like, thanks for never making us get a real job.
That's how I feel too.
the school that I went to, I think because I was interested in anything, it was not very academically inclined. I think I was encouraged because I showed an interest at all. But really it was, I recognized that there was transactional value in it way back then. Like I could get out of doing geography by doing the set of the school play, or I could appease the school bully by drawing on a skateboard. But then I started to realize that I actually really enjoy this, and I enjoy the connection that it has with how other people feel.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we love the science and art collision. There's a lot of space art projects around, and obviously yours as well. So what advice would you now give to the child, Oliver?
To the child, me?
Yeah.
I think I would encourage me to... I got it pretty early, but to say it even earlier, it was like to just stop caring what other people think.
Yeah.
So especially in art, you just have to... You've got to do it because you want to do it. And I think that that sort of self-awareness, just you second guess. And what was it, the old Robbie Burns thing? Is like, if you're worried about what other people think about you, you'd be surprised to realize how little they do.
Yeah.
And it's just you gotta be at peace with yourself. I think.
You do you.
Yeah.
Yeah. The youth is wasted on the young, though.
Yes, it is. Well, I got to meet Agnes Varda once, and she said something brilliant, which is there's only one age, alive.
Okay,
I like that.
That's pretty deep.
Yeah.
So your debut children's book, How to Catch a Star, was first published by HarperCollins in 2004, and it's gone on to sell millions of copies worldwide as well, 12 million. So was writing and illustrating for children always part of the plan?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I fell into it because I'd always considered myself an artist first, and the paintings I was making, the compositions were sort of one part of a story. There was momentum there. There was some kind of a narrative, and How to Catch a Star came about actually from recognizing the potential of one of those compositions, that there was more to it than that, and then drawing it out from, rather than 3 or 4 individual images that were like an exhibition, there's like, put this in a book, and then that forced me to think about like the beginning, the middle, and the end of a story, and really sort of finesse it. And I massively enjoyed that process and realized like, oh yeah, books are a pretty perfect platform for visual storytelling.
Yeah,
and I've just been kind of relishing in that ever since.
And with that in mind, how do you make quite sophisticated and complex ideas accessible to children? I
think that's probably the most enjoyable and the hardest part of what I do.
Yeah.
It's how can I communicate how I'm feeling in a way with as few obstacles as possible. And that's just sort of testing and trying, and I think I have to be able to understand what it is that I'm feeling to be able to convey it. But I was saying yesterday that I used to think say I was an artist, and then I would say I'm a bookmaker or a storyteller. But when I was doing this public sculpture for COP26 in Glasgow, and it was this rotating globe of the earth, where it just said people live here in all the countries over and over again, and the idea being that it was like, as the world leaders walk past it, hopefully to just sort of knock that arrogance out of them a little bit, to think that the weather doesn't care about passports. And they didn't have a box for artist for my badge, and they called me an observer and a translator. And I think it was like, that's actually a really good description of what I do, I think. So I observe, and then I try to translate.
I like that. That's really
But I try to make it as simple as possible. And I think if you keep asking the why behind the why behind the why, you can really get to something where, and I have a feeling that no matter who you are, where you're from, or what you believe, I think all people fundamentally just want the same things. I've never met anybody who actually wants to be an asshole. I think people are just misunderstood, or their stories get misunderstood, and then they feel attacked and they defend themselves, and it goes pear-shaped. But when you really get down to it, I think people always kind of want the same things. And if you can get to that deep place in a very simple way, I think that's when you can really move the needle. Yeah,
definitely. So why do you think illustration is so important in connecting with children?
Well, I think we learn to be visually literate before we learn to be actually literate. I think before you can speak, you can read a face, you can read a room, and I think that art and storytelling are probably some of the most important things that human beings have ever created. And I get into this argument with some scientists at COP26 about, it was like, I think art is more important than science. And they're like, oh, really? And I was like, well, yes, because science is the how you do something, but art is why you do it.
Yeah, definitely. I like both.
Oh, they're both absolutely essential. But it always annoyed me that it was STEM education and the STEAM was an
not STEAM.
afterthought.
Yeah.
Whereas the A is the most important letter in there.
Yeah.
And then and one of them actually, one of the scientists, like, give me an example. And it was one of those rare occasions where I could actually think of something off the top of my head. It's like, okay. I was working on a series of paintings that were called Measuring Land and Sea, and showing painting seascapes and then measuring the depth of the oceans. And I work with a friend who went to that same summer camp, who's now like a big brain marine biologist in the USA, and he was helping me with the maps. And he says, did you know that actually planet Earth is only the 5th best mapped object in our solar system, after the Moon, Mercury, Mars and Venus, simply because we have spent more money and technology on mapping those planets than bothering looking into our own oceans. And why is that? Because when the money and the technology were sort of being forced into that, it was the space race with Russia. So it was a story that defined where the science went.
Yeah, it's all storytelling.
It's all storytelling.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's nice that we hopefully can recognise that.
Yeah.
You know, during the pandemic, when we couldn't do certain things, we could look up, we could still tell stories.
Yeah.
And those were,
you know, for anybody who undermines the art, when they look back at the pandemic, what were you doing? You were watching films, you were reading books, you were listening to music.
Yeah.
You know, it's like those are some of the most important things.
Definitely. We did lots of colouring in my house. So you've exhibited in museums and galleries across the globe, including the National Portrait Gallery, the Irish Museum of Modern Art, the Palais Augsburg in Vienna, and the Bryce Wolkowitz Gallery in New York. Can you tell us about any exhibitions that we should look out for?
Well, those are all sort of one-off exhibitions. They come together for a bit and then they disperse. But there's actually an exhibition that's going to be happening. I don't know if it's going to come here though. But when I was making the art for "There's a Ghost in This House," it's again, I sort of connected the bookmaking and the art making, and similar with that perspective shifting. The ghost book came about really because I was just playing about with. I enjoy painting ghosts into empty rooms. It's just funny. It's kind of funny. And then if you do it on a sheet of tracing paper, you can move it around. And I thought that's a great premise for a book. But when I was doing the experimentation for the book, I ended up painting a lot of ghosts into a lot of empty rooms. And they were all just sort of sitting there, waiting there quietly. And then when I was looking at them all in a row, I was like, there's something really sort of tragically poignant about this. Yeah. And then, you know, and actually Bill Bryson again in that book At Home, the first line is like basically, you know, the history books are filled with people who lived fabulous lives and died gloriously, but most of us live fairly mundane, monotonous lives. And then I was looking at these going, yeah. And then why is it that people are fascinated with ghosts? Is because the terror and the fascination in equal measure. And if every culture has had some version of a ghost, but if there is an afterlife awaiting us, well, who's to say it's not going to be an extension of the way we live our actual lives? So painting all these ghosts waiting for something to happen just seemed really sad, you know, like looking for keys or waiting for the phone to ring. And it's like, if that's an eternity that awaits us, it was like, would it change the way we live our actual lives? Mm-hmm. So that there's an exhibition, like a mini one that happened in New York 2 years ago, and I'm working towards a much bigger one in a museum in Massachusetts next year, the year after maybe. That's going to be like a continuation of that.
Okay, cool. There'll be some World Book Day costumes.
Yeah.
We are going to move on to some questions from teachers and students now. Okay. So this question is from Year 5 at Bluegate Fields Junior School. Do you believe books can change the world?
100%.
Easy answer, that one. Yeah, totally agree. 2 questions from Maria and the Year 6 group at Oakfield Prep. First one, what do you think is the most fascinating thing about space?
Earth. It's got all the good food.
Definitely. Well, yeah. What's your favourite food?
Well, no, I think one of the most fascinating things about space is I just went to the Brian Cox lecture. I consider myself fairly intelligent human being, and I followed him for a while. And then he started getting into dark holes, and I was like, nope. Fabric for space time. No.
Yeah, no. I know, I'm the same.
It's just like he says when you get inside a black hole, time and space reverse roles. I was like, hang on a minute. Let me think about that. Yeah. And I think that, the more we know, the more we don't know.
Definitely.
It's like there's just the notion of the vastness of it all.
Yeah, that's why I like planetary science, because it's very tangible. Stay in the solar system. So if you could live on another planet, whether that's in our solar system or not, which one would it be and why?
I don't think I would want to, but I actually did think I would like to go to the moon.
Yeah.
I'd like to have a holiday house on the moon, but I'd be pretty lonely up there. I really like other people.
Yeah, okay.
But to be able to see Earth hanging like a Christmas ornament, as one of the Apollo 8 astronauts put it, I think would be pretty special.
Yeah, I'd like to see Saturn, but I wouldn't like to live there.
No.
The last question from a school, it's from Sarah at St Andrew's C of E in Enfield. What 3 things would you take with you on a journey into space and why?
Brian Cox. A lot of food, I think. I'd take my family. Can that count as one? Okay, so my family count as one. If we're going to sort of imagine there's a fridge full of really good food and music.
Yeah, okay.
Classical music.
Oh, okay. Brilliant. Well, that's quite a nice way to end, I think.
Yeah, okay.
So the teachers that sent questions in are going to get a.
Well, by the way, I'm assuming we're not going to get cold or anything like that.
No, yeah. We're assuming.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And you've got like a CD player and stuff.
Yeah.
Or whatever people use these days.
Like pick up Saturn radio.
Oh, no, so the teachers that have asked questions are going to get a signed copy of your book for their schools.
Brilliant.
So congratulations to those teachers and those schools. Just want to say thank you for coming today. Thank you to CLPE and the RAS and HarperCollins. Meanwhile, Back on Earth is out now. Buy it, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.